sirens were ringing out across Jerusalem.
Why?
Wow!
This was the moment when this war with Iran was just meters away from escalating, perhaps to a point of no return.
It is a wall of solid stone now, but when the eastern gate of Jerusalem comes under threat, the spiritual world reacts. Prophecies surge, ancient tensions waver, and the nations issue urgent warnings. Because this isn't just a part of a wall, it is a gate, and gates decide the outcomes of eternity. For the first time in modern history, following the joint strikes from the U.S. and Israel, the regional conflict has reached the foot of the sealed gate. It is the world's most critical prophetic choke point. Reports indicate that the atmosphere around the Temple Mount has been locked down, with authorities ordered to prevent any spiritual or physical claim to this hallowed entrance. In Genesis 22:17, God declared, "Your descendant shall possess the gate of their enemies." In the ancient world, gates were everything. Authority sat there. A law was decreed there. Military power concentrated there. If you control the gate, you control the future. That principle has never disappeared. We no longer just fight over modern canals like Suez or Panama. We are returning to the original stone city gates, the global ones that define the destiny of nations. When the Golden Gate, the very entrance the Bible says the King of Glory will pass through, is destabilized, nations are reminded how fragile their earthly control really is. Before we continue, if you find this topic meaningful, if you feel that God brought you to this video, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the revelations to come. Daniel saw kingdoms rise like beasts from the sea, and Revelation speaks of global systems and shifting powers. For centuries, those words felt like distant metaphors. But today, Hanon, the system is built. The world is wired together, and the focus has narrowed down to the single sealed entrance in Jerusalem. Jesus said there would be wars and rumors of wars, nation against nation. When the gates of the holy city begin to shake, it isn't chaos. It is history moving toward an appointed end. Empires rise, they capture gates, and they lose them. But Daniel 2:44 tells us that the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. The gates of the nations are shaking, and the sealed gate is at the center of the storm. But history is not unraveling. It is advancing toward a kingdom that cannot be moved. If you are a Christian, you don't need to be afraid. God is perfectly in control. He is sovereign over the nations and the gates they try to guard. This isn't a moment for fear, but for faith. Right now, and as you're watching this, ancient stones are whispering in Jerusalem. The eastern gate, the one Ezekiel said would stay shut until God himself returns, is moving. Dust is falling where no wind blows. Tremors pulse through ground that hasn't shifted in centuries. For 2,500 years, this prophecy has waited. Empires tried to stop it. Sultans sealed it with stone. Muslims buried their dead in front of it. But something stronger than human hands is pushing from the other side. And if the witnesses are right, if the signs are real, then what happens next will change everything. But first, you need to understand why this gate isn't just stone and mortar. It's a prophetic time bomb. In 1969, archaeologist James Fleming was photographing the Eastern Gate when the rain-soaked ground beneath his feet suddenly gave way. He fell 8 feet into darkness. When he looked up from the mud, his flashlight revealed something that shouldn't exist. Another gate, an older gate, a key hidden directly beneath the sealed one. Think about that. 2 gates, one on top of the other, one already fulfilled when Christ entered Jerusalem, one still waiting. But here's what Fleming discovered next that changed everything. The lower gate stones dated back to the time of Jesus, the exact period when prophecy says a king rode through on a donkey, which means the gate we see sealed today. The one showing these mysterious signs isn't the original. It's the second gate up to the one meant for the second coming. And 3 days ago, amidst the height of the current conflict, something started happening to the Eastern Gate that has Israeli authorities scrambling to keep quiet. Sarah Chen, a veteran guide who has navigated the Temple Mount for 15 years, even through the tightest security lockdowns, was leading a small group during a rare sunrise opening when she heard it. A sound like breathing, rhythmic and deep, coming from the solid, ancient stone. "I've touched that wall thousands of times," she reported, "but that morning, even as the sirens echoed in the distance, I felt a warmth. Not from the sun hadn't reached that side of the Kidron Valley yet. The stone was radiating heat from within." She's not alone. 17 different witnesses, including members of the security detail, have reported the same phenomenon in the past week. Border police guards, already on high alert due to the regional escalation, now reportedly hesitate to patrol the base of the gate at night. Even Jerusalem's thousands of stray cats, although usually indifferent to the chaos of the city, won't cross the threshold of the gate's shadow anymore. To understand why this matters, why religious leaders are holding emergency meetings even as missiles are intercepted overhead, you have to know the gate's impossible history. This isn't just an architectural relic. It sits on a perfect prophetic line, a geographic decree written into the earth from the Mount of Olives across the Kidron Valley, straight through the eastern gate to where the Holy of Holies once stood. Ezekiel watched God's glory leave the temple through this exact route, and he saw it returning from the east through the same gate. Then came the command that should terrify any modern power trying to control it. "It shall remain shut because I have entered through it." So why did Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent seal it in 1541? It was a cosmic chess move. Suleiman knew the prophecies. Jewish texts said the Messiah would enter here, and Christian writings claimed Jesus would return through it. He sealed the gate to block the prophecy and built a cemetery directly in front of it, thinking a priest Messiah could not walk through graves without becoming ritually impure. But Suleiman didn't realize that by sealing the gate, he was actually fulfilling Ezekiel's command that it remain shut. God used the Sultan's fear to accomplish divine will. However, within a year of sealing the gate, Suleiman's empire, which had expanded for decades, suddenly stalled. His favorite son died mysteriously. His grand vizier was executed. The man who tried to stop prophecy was stopped himself. Every attempt to interfere with the gate since has ended in a brush with disaster. In the 1967 Six-Day War, when Israeli paratroopers captured the Mount, and Commander Mordecai Gur radioed the words, "The Temple Mount is in our hands," some soldiers wanted to blow the eastern gate open. It was their moment of total control, but Rabbi Shlomo Goren stopped them. "Only the Messiah opens that gate," he warned. "Anyone else will bring judgment." The gate stayed sealed. But in the years leading up to today's conflict, tensions have only mounted. In February 2019, protesters forced their way into the gate's inner chambers through side passages, declaring it a prayer space. Today, as the region stands on the brink of a total war, the authorities find themselves in an impossible position. They can monitor the gate with high-tech sensors and thermal cameras, but they cannot explain why the ancient stones are suddenly breathing. Since that day, witnesses say the phenomena have intensified. Cracks are appearing overnight, not random fractures, but patterns that some claim form ancient Hebrew letters, while others see traces of archaic script. Depending on who is looking through the lens of their faith, the stones seem to be speaking in different tongues. Dr. Rebecca Harrison, a seismologist from Tel Aviv University, was called to investigate under heavy military escort. Her equipment detected something that defies every scientific law. The vibrations, Dr. Harrison reported, are not from tectonic activity. Watch, the frequency is wrong. It is rhythmic, like a pulse centered directly behind the sealed stones. She measured it at 72 beats per minute, the exact resting heartbeat of a human being. The Earth itself has a pulse at this spot, and as the regional war escalates, that pulse is getting stronger. But while the world watches the sky for missiles, a different kind of energy is sweeping through the streets of Jerusalem. Many Israelis are not reacting with fear, but with a radical, infectious joy. In the midst of the sirens, groups are gathering to dance and pray, firmly believing that this chaos is the war of Gog and Magog that must precede the Messiah's arrival. To them, the heartbeat in the stone isn't a geological anomaly. It is the sound of their king approaching the gate. A ground-penetrating radar reveals hollow spaces behind the seal, chambers that shouldn't exist, forming a pattern that ancient texts describe as the footprint of the divine. The Waqf forbids excavation, and the Israeli government, already managing a multi-front war, won't risk the total political collapse that an investigation would trigger. So the mystery remains buried, but the signs are surfacing anyway. Last Tuesday, a group of Christian pilgrims were praying at dawn when they witnessed something that hasn't happened in 500 years. Moisture. Seeping through the ancient seal, not from rain. Jerusalem had been dry for weeks under the heat of the conflict. When tested, the salinity was consistent with human tears. These tears appeared on Tisha B'Av, the exact day both Jewish temples were destroyed and the date of Israel's greatest historical tragedies. But this time, the mood is different. Rabbi Yosef Berger, who oversees King David's tomb, revealed a secret passed down to him. When the stones weep at the eastern gate, count 40 days. What happens next will shake the nations. 40 days from those tears leads directly to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day in Judaism, when the high priest would once send the scapegoat through this very gate. As the 40-day countdown begins, the atmosphere in Jerusalem is electric. For the believers on the ground, the war isn't an end. It's a countdown to the moment the sealed gate finally yields to the one they have waited for 2 millennia. The countdown has already started, and strange things are accelerating across Jerusalem. And directly across from the eastern gate, the Mount of Olives is splitting. Not metaphorically, literally. A crack now runs 300 feet from north to south. It appeared in 2018, but in the last 3 months, it's widened from 2 inches to 14 inches. Zechariah prophesied this exact split would happen when the Messiah's feet touched the mountain. Scientists blame it on construction, a new hotel, water pipe damage. But the crack doesn't follow construction lines. It runs perfectly east to west, directly toward the eastern gate. And here's what the media won't report. Olive trees along the crack are blooming out of season. October olives in Jerusalem are supposed to be harvested, not flowering. But these trees are producing fresh blossoms, white flowers that locals say smell like frankincense. The last time olive trees bloomed out of season in Jerusalem, 70 AD, weeks before the Romans destroyed the temple. But something else is happening that's even more disturbing. Remember Sulian Cemetery, the one he built to stop the Messiah? For 500 years, those graves have been undisturbed. Muslim tradition forbids moving the dead. But in the past 6 months, something impossible has been documented. The graves are sinking, not from erosion. The ground is dry, not from construction. No one's allowed to dig there. The graves are descending straight down uniformly and as if the earth is swallowing them. Ahmad Rashid, whose family has tended these graves for 7 generations, broke his silence last week. My grandfather warned this would happen. He said, "When the Jewish Messiah comes, our dead would make way." I thought it was a foolish superstition, but now I see it with my own eyes. Where 23 graves have sunk so far, all in a straight line, creating a path from the Mount of Olives to the Eastern Gate. At the Israeli Antiquities Authority measured the subsidence. Each grave has descended exactly 7 feet. 7, the number of completion in Hebrew numerology, the number of God's perfect timing. But Jerusalem isn't the only place showing signs. In Rome, the Arch of Titus, built to celebrate Jerusalem's destruction, developed a crack on the same day the Eastern Gate showed its first fissure. The crack runs through the carved image of the temple treasures being carried away. And in Babylon, modern Iraq, locals report strange sounds from ancient ruins, sounds like trumpets, but no source can be found. In Greece, at Mars Hill, where Paul preached about the unknown God, a long dormant spring began flowing. The water emerged on Pentecost. Chemical analysis shows it matches the mineral content of water from the Pool of Siloam in Jerusalem. That's scientifically impossible. The locations are 800 meters apart. 7 locations, 7 signs are all connected to places mentioned in prophecy about the end times. 2 weeks ago, amidst the heaviest bombardment of the 2026 conflict, Netanyahu stated that Israel is now stronger than it has been at any point in history, emphasizing that the nation must recognize its endurance through strategic alliances and sheer determination. He suggested that the Jewish people are finally approaching what he described as the Messianic Era, though he cautioned that such a transformative moment would not arrive overnight. Those words quickly ignited a firestorm across global networks. Many interpreted the statement as a direct reference to the imminent arrival of the Messiah and the long-prophesied restoration of full sovereignty over the Western Wall, the last standing remnant of the ancient foundations. Others argued that the translation may have been amplified by the tension of the current war. A community note later suggested that Netanyahu might have been referring more broadly to a period of national peace and fulfillment in Jewish tradition, rather than the literal physical arrival of a redeemer. Even so, the discussion raised haunting questions. Was Netanyahu speaking symbolically about Israel's survival? Was he referencing the deep-seated spiritual hopes tied specifically to the Western Wall? Or could his words be a calculated hint at a religious prophecy unfolding in real time? For Jews, the Western Wall is the focal point of prayer, the gateway to heaven, where the divine presence never left. The restoration of the area is seen as a central part of future redemption. For Christians, however, these same events are interpreted through a different lens. Many believe that moves to reclaim or transform the sacred geography of Jerusalem signal the beginning of the final prophetic sequence described in the Bible. When world leaders begin using the vocabulary of messianic eras, while standing in the shadow of the Western Wall, it commands the world's attention. Whether the comments were mistranslated or taken out of context, they have reignited a global debate about history and the destiny of the most contested stones on Earth. For now, no new structure is being built. The area surrounding the Western Wall remains the most politically and religiously sensitive ground in existence. But the question remains, when leaders invoke ancient prophecies while the region is engulfed in flame, are these simply political words meant to boost morale? Or are we witnessing the opening chapters of a script written thousands of years ago? If you have been following the current combat involving Israel, America, and Iran, you know we are no longer dealing with rumors of wars. We are in the midst of a conflict that could literally turn into the very global catastrophe we have been trying to avoid for generations. But in recent days, the sky changed. What started as scattered motion became a dense, shifting mass. Thousands, then tens of thousands of insects filled the air above Jerusalem, moving in synchronized waves. Around the sacred areas near the Western Wall, the swarm thickened, circling the lights, covering sections of the sky like a living cloud. People slowed down, not because they were told to, but because something about it felt different. The air carried a low, constant hum, the sound of wings moving together. It wasn't chaotic, it wasn't random. It was organized, controlled, almost intentional. Phones came out, cameras lifted. But even through the screens, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a moment. It felt like a sign. In Scripture, swarms like this are never just background events. In the book of Exodus, locusts covered the land so completely that light itself was dimmed. Not as destruction alone, but as a warning, a signal that something greater was unfolding behind the visible world. And in Revelation, the locusts appear again, not as ordinary creatures, but as symbols tied to judgment, to the release of something long restrained. What made this moment unsettling wasn't fear, it was timing, because this didn't happen in isolation. It appeared after the sky had already begun to shift, after the atmosphere over the city had already changed, as if the sequence was continuing. The ground moves, the sky reacts, and now the living world responds. So the question isn't why insects gathered. The deeper question is this: when creation itself begins to move in patterns like this, is it reacting to something already happening or preparing for something that hasn't happened yet? At first, people barely noticed. A light rain over Jerusalem isn't impossible, but it's rare enough, especially in certain seasons, to make a few look up. Some paused, when others continued walking, assuming it would pass. But it didn't. Within minutes, the rain grew heavier. Dark clouds gathered quickly over the city, pressing low over the ancient stone skyline. The sound of water began echoing across the plaza, soft at first, then constant, then overwhelming. The limestone ground, usually dry and pale, turned dark and reflective. And then something unusual happened. Water began to collect, not in distant streets, but right there, near one of the most sacred places in the world. Thin streams formed across the stone, flowing together, spreading wider, moving closer to the base of the Western Wall. Reflections of light shimmered in the water. The ground looked almost unfamiliar, People slowed down again. Some stepped back. Others stayed, watching quietly, because this didn't feel like just rain. What in Scripture, water is never just water. It carries meaning. It marks moments of transition, of cleansing, of judgment. From the flood in Genesis to the visions in the prophets, water appears when something is being reset or revealed. And what made this moment heavier was not just the rain, but when it came. After the sky had already shifted, after the swarms had already filled the air, now the ground itself was being covered. The sequence continued. The sky changes. The creatures respond. And now, water moves in. Not violently, not destructively, but deliberately, as if something was being washed, prepared, or exposed. Because throughout Scripture, cleansing always comes before revelation. So the question isn't why it rained. The question is, why here? Why now? Why does it feel like the city itself is being prepared for something still unseen? Maybe it's symbolic, maybe it's literal, but the convergence is undeniable. Everything is accelerating toward a moment when the spiritual and physical worlds merge completely. And when that moment comes, the choice you make today becomes your eternal reality tomorrow. This isn't about religion. It's not about church attendance or ritual observance. It's about relationship. It's about recognizing that the same God who breathed life into Adam, who spoke creation into existence, who walked with humanity in Eden, that God is returning to reclaim what's his. Oh, and he's offering you a choice. Return with him voluntarily now or face him as judge later. The evidence is overwhelming. The signs are undeniable. The timeline is accelerating. And now, what will you do with this information? We're not just approaching a moment in history. We're approaching the moment, the hinge point of human existence, the instant when everything changes forever. But the irreversible threshold. There's a principle in physics called the event horizon, the point beyond which nothing can escape a black hole's gravity, not even light. Cross that threshold and your fate is sealed. We're approaching a spiritual event horizon, a point beyond which neutrality becomes impossible. A moment when every human must choose which side of the dividing line they'll occupy. And the signs suggest that moment is closer than anyone imagines. Past the final countdown converges, the astronomical alignment of Revelation 12, the seismic acceleration at Temple Mount, 7 different systems in 7 independent timelines, in all pointing to the days of the Lord. Coincidence doesn't function at this scale. This is design. This is announcement. This is the Creator orchestrating reality to wake up a sleeping world. Right now, 2 gates stand before humanity. The eastern gate in Jerusalem, sealed by human hands, opening by divine command, admitting the king to his throne. The gate of your heart, sealed by your choice, opened by your surrender, admitting the king to his rightful place in your life. Both gates are connected. What happens in Jerusalem affects every soul on earth. When the eastern gate opens, every heart will be revealed. Every motivation will be exposed. Every secret thing will be brought to light. The question is what will be found when your heart is revealed. If the convergence is accurate, if the signs are true, we have less than 40 days before the old world ends and the new world begins. Well, 40 days to examine your life. 40 days to settle accounts with eternity. 40 days to make peace with your Creator. It sounds like pressure. It sounds like fear tactics. But it's not manipulation. It's mercy. God is giving warning, providing time, offering one last chance before the door closes. Noah preached for 120 years before the flood came. People mocked, people ignored, people continued their lives as if nothing would change until the day the rains began. Then it was too late. Lot warned Sodom about coming judgment. People laughed. People dismissed him as a fanatic until fire fell from heaven. Then it was too late. Jesus warned Jerusalem of coming destruction. People rejected him. People shouted, "Crucify me," until Roman legions surrounded the city in 70 AD. Then it was too late. The pattern is clear. God warns before he acts. He provides evidence. He sends messengers. He gives time. But eventually the time runs out. The door closes. The judgment arrives out of the choice before you. You're not reading this by accident. You're not hearing this message randomly. Of the billions of people on earth, of the infinite content available online, you encountered this specific information at this specific time. That's not coincidence. That's providence. That's God orchestrating circumstances to ensure you hear the warning, to give you the choice, to offer you the invitation before it's too late. So what will you choose? You don't need complicated theology. Yeah, you don't need perfect understanding. You need simple honesty. If you recognize that you've lived for yourself, if you acknowledge that you need something beyond yourself, if you're willing to surrender control to someone greater, then speak it out loud right now. God, I don't understand everything, but I recognize the signs. I see the evidence. I know something is coming, and I don't want to face it alone. I need you. I surrender to you. I open the gate of my heart. Come in. Be my king. Prepare me for what's coming. That's it. No magic words, no perfect formula, just honest surrender. And when you speak it, when you mean it, something shifts in the unseen realm. Something marks you, something seals you, something prepares you for the moment when the eastern gate opens and reality as we know it transforms forever. Whether you believe it or not, whether you prepare or not, whether you are render or resist, the king is coming. The stones are breathing, the earth is shaking, and the dead are stirring. The blind are seeing, the children are singing, the whales are gathering, the AI is prophesying, the atmosphere is splitting, the DNA is transforming. All creation is announcing the same message. Prepare. The king returns. And when he does, every knee will bow. Every tongue will confess. Every heart will acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord. The only question is whether you'll bow in joy or in terror, whether you'll confess in worship or in judgment, but whether you'll acknowledge him as Savior or as Judge. Can you hear it? The ancient stones are groaning. The seals are breaking. The barriers between heaven and earth are dissolving. Can you feel it? The atmospheric pressure changing, or the spiritual temperature rising, the urgency intensifying. Can you see it? The signs multiplying, the timeline accelerating, the convergence approaching. The eastern gate is opening, not someday, not eventually. Now in our time, in our generation, perhaps in the next 2 days. And when it opens fully, when the king steps through, when glory returns to Jerusalem, everything changes forever, irreversibly, completely. The choice is yours. But choose quickly because the gate is moving. Time is running out, and what comes next will shock even those who believed it was coming.
1967 was a miracle. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible.
Jesus, blessed Jesus. Whoa. Look at this, Mary.
On the day when missiles landed nearby Jerusalem holiest sites, it is said to be one of the most scariest nights that believers have ever seen in their entire life. Now, another development describes every single bone-chilling details about how the most scariest prophecies have now officially come true. In different parts of the sky, people began noticing something unusual. Without warning, a hailstorm hit. Not the usual kind. Chunks of ice falling with force, striking rooftops, streets, anything exposed. And right after it ended, the ground gave way, opening without warning. No earthquake, no storm system passing through. Just the earth, collapsing into itself. The tension followed. Sirens began to echo across Jerusalem. Not once, but repeatedly. The Iron Dome activating in the distance, intercepting incoming missiles. But that wasn't the only thing the radar detected. Suddenly, the focus of the world shifted back to the same place it always does. And right in the middle of all this, a strange comment surfaced. A simple question, what are you reading? And the answer was even simpler. A book about the wars between the Jews and Rome, a war they lost, a temple destroyed, a nation scattered. But what stood out wasn't the history, it was what came next. We lost that war. We cannot lose the next. The next. Not past, future. And that raises a question no one is asking. If that war hasn't happened yet, then who is Rome now? Rome was never just a nation. It was a system, a power, an empire that believed it would last forever. And if history is being studied, not as memory, but as preparation, what we're seeing right now might not be random at all. But before we jump to conclusions, we need to slow down and look at what actually just happened. If you find this topic meaningful, please like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest events. The Western Wall stands at the heart of one of the most spiritually charged landscapes on Earth, surrounded by sites sacred to Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But recently, something far more unsettling has begun to unfold above it. Footage circulating online does not just show missiles crossing the sky over the old city. Intertwined with those trails are strange, in unexplainable lights, flashes that appear and fade among the paths of moving projectiles. Air raid sirens echo as people look upward, not only at the threat of incoming fire, but at something harder to define. Viewed through the lens of converging end-time beliefs, the meaning shifts entirely. This is not just proximity, a convergence point where history, faith, and conflict overlap in ways that feel anything but random. Peter Hegseth, who is a Secretary of War for Donald Trump, when he was in Jerusalem, he was talking to Christian Zionists and Zionists. Who these people are will be explained later on. He recounted that he and several others had the opportunity to visit the Western Wall, was traversing the ancient tunnels beneath the Temple Mount and exploring various areas within the old city of Jerusalem. Standing there, amidst the ruins of thousands of years of history, they clearly felt something beyond the ordinary, a feeling like witnessing a miracle unfolding before their eyes. That experience led them to draw parallels with other miracles in Israeli history. They recalled 1917 as a miraculous turning point, 1948, the year Israel was founded, as well, then 1967 with its major territorial changes, and 2017 when Jerusalem was recognized as the capital. In their view, all these milestones were not simply political events, but represented the realization of the impossible. From that, they came to the conclusion, if things that were once considered impossible in the past have happened, well, then rebuilding the temple on Temple Mount in the future is not impossible either. So he is a Christian, he's not a Jew. But what he's saying is that he's come to Jerusalem and he's visited these Jewish holy sites, and he can't help but be amazed by the beauty, the spirituality of the Western Wall. He also goes on to say that there's been a series of miracles. So 1917 was the buffer declaration when basically the British Empire permitted the Jews to found the nation-state of Israel. 1948 was when Israel was founded. 1967 was when Israel fought a war against its neighbors and won. In 2017 was when Donald Trump transferred the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, thus recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And what he's saying is that, well, if this is a series of steps to achieving a divine plan, then the next miracle should be the rebuilding of someone's temple, the third temple, and that means destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So what's going on here? When strange lights appear alongside missiles in the skies above these sites, it raises a deeper question. Are we witnessing a conflict of territory or a collision of belief systems? Because increasingly, end-time interpretations are no longer confined to theology. They are influencing real-world decisions, shaping geopolitics, and fueling visions of establishing a heaven on earth through radically different religious frameworks. That is why this moment feels so dangerous, not simply because weapons are near sacred ground, but because belief itself may be driving what happens next. The sky itself has begun to change without warning. What started as a normal day quickly turned into something far more unsettling. Without any clear buildup, dark clouds gathered over the old city, and then it began. Hail, not the usual kind. Large, solid chunks of ice falling with force, striking stone streets, rooftops, and the ancient walls that have stood for centuries. What makes this event especially disturbing is what didn't happen. There were no major storm systems moving through the region. No long forecast warning people to prepare. The sky did not gradually shift. It changed suddenly. And then the hail came down with intensity, as if released all at once. Meteorologists may point to atmospheric instability, sudden temperature drops, or rare weather patterns. But for those standing beneath it, the explanation feels incomplete. Eyewitnesses describe something deeper, a sense that the sky itself became unpredictable. What once felt stable and familiar now feels uncertain. The Bible often uses the sky and weather as signs, moments when the natural world reflects something beyond itself. It speaks of sudden events, not as isolated incidents, but as warnings, signals that something unseen is building beneath the surface of reality. That is what makes this moment difficult to dismiss. This was not a slow-forming storm. It was abrupt, concentrated, and precisely located over one of the most historically and spiritually significant cities on Earth. The pattern raises questions, not just about weather, but about timing. A different kind of disturbance has begun to draw attention, not from the sky, but from the ground itself. Without warning, sections of Earth have started to give way. Small sinkholes have appeared along roads, near walkways, even in areas not far from the old city. At first, they seemed isolated, but the reports began to increase. What makes this unusual is not just the collapse, but the pattern. These sinkholes are not forming after heavy rain or earthquakes. There are no dramatic triggers. The ground simply opens, quietly and suddenly, as if something beneath the surface has been shifting for some time. Engineers point to natural causes, underground erosion, water slowly dissolving layers of rock, hidden cavities forming over years. But even with these explanations, the timing raises questions. These events are happening close together, within a narrow window, and in a city where the ground carries not just structures, but history. In Scripture, whilst the earth often represents what is hidden beneath the surface, foundations, stability, things unseen but relied upon. When the ground begins to open, it is not just a physical event. It becomes symbolic. Something concealed is being exposed. Something long buried is no longer able to remain hidden. These moments are not loud or explosive. They are quiet, subtle, yet deeply unsettling. A street looks normal until it isn't. A path feels solid until it gives way. And that raises a deeper question. If the ground beneath one of the most significant cities in human history is beginning to shift, what has been changing underneath? Because in Scripture, revelation often comes before reckoning. Signs appear, not to create fear, but to draw attention. A journalist was asking Benjamin Netanyahu, "What book are you reading now?" And he says, Rome versus the Jews. It's a book by Barry Strauss, a historian, and it goes on about the 3 wars that the Jews fought against the Romans. And it was essentially a Holocaust for the Jews. A lot of Jews either died or were enslaved. The Romans burned down the Second Temple. So there's this historical animosity of the Jews against the Romans. But what Ben Netanyahu said is that I'm reading this book because we lost that war against Rome, but the next war against Rome, we must not lose. The question then is, who's Rome? It's not Iran. It's probably not Russia. It's probably America, right? The great empire. So this is strange because Israel is the ally of America in this war. But Netanyahu is saying that no, our real enemy is Rome, and that's what we must prepare for. Deep beneath the layers of Jerusalem's ancient ground, a discovery has emerged that feels out of place in both time and context. During excavation work near the outskirts of the old city, workers uncovered a stone slab etched with unfamiliar symbols, markings that some believe point toward an end time or final era. Buried beneath centuries of debris, the object had remained hidden, untouched until now. What makes this discovery unsettling is not only the suggestion behind the symbols, but their origin. The carvings do not clearly match known scripts from the region's well-documented civilizations. They appear deliberate, precise, and aged, preserved beneath layers of soil that have witnessed empires rise and fall. Archaeologists continue to analyze the markings, yet no single explanation has resolved the growing questions. Whether this stone represents a warning, a record, or something left behind by a forgotten moment in history, its timing is difficult to ignore. It has surfaced not in a season of peace, but during a period marked by tension, instability, and a growing sense that events are accelerating beyond control. The meaning may be uncertain, but the moment feels significant. Individually, none of these events are impossible. Hailstorms can form under unstable atmospheric conditions, especially when sudden temperature shifts create the right pressure for ice to build rapidly in the clouds. Sinkholes, can happen when underground layers weaken over time. Water erodes the soil beneath the surface, creating empty spaces that eventually collapse. And the rockets? That part is no mystery. Tensions in the region have been rising for months. Recent launches triggered repeated sirens across Jerusalem, with defense systems intercepting incoming threats midair. Some impacts were reported in surrounding areas, close enough to be felt, even if not enough to dominate global headlines. So yes, on their own, each of these events has an explanation. Weather, geology, conflict, nothing new. But here's where it becomes harder to ignore. The timing, the sequence, from above to below to underground, and then to war. Not spread out over years, not isolated, but happening within the same narrow window. And that raises a different kind of question. Not what is this, but why now? Because history has shown something unsettling. When events begin to align, they rarely stay isolated for long. And if this is a sequence, then what we've seen so far might only be the beginning. So the next question is unavoidable. Why does all of this keep leading back to Jerusalem? Because this city is not like any other. For thousands of years, Jerusalem has stood at the center of something far bigger than politics. Three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all point to this exact place as sacred, not symbolic, literal. Within a few hundred meters, you have the Western Wall, the Temple Mount, and one of the most contested pieces of land in human history. This is where the ancient temple once stood. This is where it was destroyed, and this is where many believe it could one day rise again. That alone makes this city different, but it goes deeper than that. Jerusalem has never experienced long periods of peace. Empires have fought over it. Kingdoms have claimed it. Wars have started and ended around it. Again and again. And every time history reaches a turning point, this city reappears at the center, not on the sidelines, at the center. So when unusual events begin happening here, from the sky to the ground to conflict, it doesn't feel isolated. It feels familiar, like something we've seen before, or at least something history has been trying to repeat. Because Jerusalem isn't just a location, it's a convergence point of belief, of power, of expectation. And when all of those begin to move at the same time, that's when things start to shift, not gradually, but suddenly. So maybe the real question isn't just why these events are happening, but why they're happening here. Because if history is repeating itself, then Jerusalem isn't just part of the story. It might be where the next chapter begins. So what's going on here? Let's go one more. A video began circulating online, capturing a controversial statement made during a discussion in Israel. The speaker outlined a radical idea tied to the long-debated issue of rebuilding the Third Temple. According to this perspective, in order for such a structure to be established, the current Islamic holy sites on that land, particularly the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, would first need to be removed. The statement went further, suggesting a hypothetical scenario. During a period of missile conflict, it could have been possible to create the appearance that a strike from Iran had hit one of these sites. In that scenario, blame could shift toward Iran, potentially triggering wider conflict within the region itself. The idea presented was not framed as an official policy, but as an extreme viewpoint expressed in a moment of speculation. As the clip spread, it raised confusion and concern. Many viewers questioned who holds such beliefs and why they would even be discussed. But rather than focusing on the individual, the broader issue begins to take shape. Because to understand tensions in this region, a purely geopolitical explanation is often not enough. There is another layer, one rooted in religion. Jerusalem is home to some of the most sacred sites in the world. For Muslims, Mecca and Medina remain the holiest cities, followed by Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, believed to be the place connected to the Prophet Muhammad's night journey. For Jews, the same ground is associated with the ancient temple, once home to the Holy of Holies. And for some Christian groups, the rebuilding of that temple is linked to prophetic expectations about the end times. This creates a convergence of beliefs, different interpretations of the same location, each carrying deep spiritual significance. And that is where the tension intensifies. Because for some, this is not just about land or politics. It is about prophecy, fulfillment, and the future they believe is meant to unfold, which leads to a critical question. If these interpretations are influencing real-world thinking, then what happens next may not be driven by strategy alone, but by belief. And that is why this moment deserves closer examination. So let's step back and look at this differently, not as separate events, but as a sequence. First, it came from above, a sudden hailstorm, fast, violent, without warning. Then, the ground gave way, a sinkhole, opening where nothing suggested it would. And then, what was buried began to surface, hidden structures, layers that had remained unseen for generations. And finally, conflict, sirens, interceptions, tension rising over the same city history keeps returning to, one after another, not spread out, not disconnected, but happening within the same narrow window, from above to the surface, to beneath, and then all around. That's not just a list of events. That's movement, directional, because when things happen randomly, they scatter. But this didn't scatter. It aligned, and that raises a different kind of question. Not what caused each event, but why this order? Why this timing? Why this place? Because patterns don't demand attention at first. They reveal themselves slowly until ignoring them becomes harder than acknowledging them. And if this is a pattern, then it's incomplete, because sequences don't stop halfway. They build, they escalate, they lead somewhere. So the real question isn't just what we've seen, it's what comes next. Because if everything so far has followed a direction, then whatever comes next won't be random either. So there's new theory of game theory called the law of eschatological convergence. So this is a very hard thing to write down. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Eschatological, what it is a story of how the world ends. And it's very compelling for people because, as human beings, we have three questions. Where do we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? And eschatology provides a story that answers all three questions. Why God created us, what our mission on earth is, and what God has planned for the end of the world. And different traditions will have different eschatologies. And what's important to figure out is in what aspect do these eschatologies converge? Converge meaning a union of these eschatologies. And why is that important? Because it allows you to predict how they will behave. Think of a story as the operating system of a society, and as such, it's a script that they will act out. And if you're able to figure out the different scripts and see how they converge together, where the union of these different scripts are, then you can actually predict how the world will turn out. So having explained the law, we're going to go into some theory to help us understand why this works. So the first thing to understand is something called the universal law of game theory. And the universal law of game theory states this: whoever wins a game is able to do this. Mass times energy times coordination. So these are the three things you want to look at to understand how well a player would do in a game. So mass is just the number of people involved on the team. Energy is just how much attention, focus, and motivation there is. So think of it as attention, or motivation, or action. Any of these words will do. But basically, how invested are you in winning the game? And how hard are you willing to work to win the game? And coordination is just the idea of synchronicity. And what I mean by that is how well do the teammates work together? And something that you need to appreciate is that the most important thing in war and winning a game is actually coordination. In fact, now it's 4 times more important than just mass. So you can have a lot of people, but if they don't work well together, you're defeated by another team with a few people, but they work well together. And an energy is twice as important as mass. So an example, let's just say that you're playing a game by yourself. Maybe, for example, you enter a ping pong competition or a chess competition. Mass and coordination don't really matter because you don't have any teammates. And so what matters is energy. How motivated you are to win this game. How much time do you put in practice? How much time do you put into studying and improving yourself? How focused are you in winning? So a team sport, mass is constant. And so what matters is energy and coordination. How well the team works well together. Well, now what's interesting is that there are different ways to improve or augment the energy and coordination. So maybe a leader. So maybe if someone is a really inspiring leader, that will make people much more motivated, and that will allow them to work well together because all they have to do is listen to a leader. The problem with leader, of course, is that eventually he will die. Then you have a family. They work well together because they all share similar blood. But we cannot account for the differences within this family, the conflict within this family, right? So historically, in the long term, the force that allows teams to beat other teams is the idea of narrative or a story. Why? Because it implants in the minds of all those who believe in a narrative, a series of actions that they must take in order to win the game. So think of it as a script, and in a script, you know what part you play. So you just have to act it out, and that allows for you all to work together to achieve the outcome that you desire. Does that make sense? And in narrative, the most powerful form of narrative is the idea of eschatology, because eschatology is a complete script in which everyone knows what he or she must do in order to achieve the desired outcome. And as eschatology also is able to transcend both time and space, meaning that you can actually spend centuries acting out the script because everyone knows his role anyway. And it can transcend borders as well. You can go beyond ethnic identity and family. So the most powerful mechanism in history is eschatology. So what is eschatology? So most religions are similar. Most religions require you to be a good person, be humble, be kind, be generous. But there are certain aspects of religions that are extreme, and we call them eschatology. So the classic example is a Jewish religion. In the Jewish religion, what you believe is that you no longer live in Israel because a long time ago, the Israelites pissed off God by disobeying him. God told the Israelites, do not worship false idols. But the Israelites sinned. They disobeyed. So they were kicked out of Jerusalem, and they were forced to wander the earth in a diaspora for centuries. And so what they believe is that they each need to engage in an act of redemption, of humility, of submission, of piety to God if they are to redeem the whole Jewish people. And when that happens, when they recognize their own limitations, when they recognize how inferior they are to God and submit to God, then God will send the Messiah to redeem them and lead them back to Jerusalem, defeat the enemies of the Jews, bring all the Jews from the dash back to Jerusalem, unifying the Jewish people, and then build the third temple so that God can come to earth and live with all the Jews and create heaven on earth. That is the Jewish religion that most Jews believe. Like, there are a lot of differences, but we just trying to simplify it for clarity. But then you have these extremes fanatics who have a different eschatology. And these people we can say are accelerationists. And what is their point is that this is fine, but it's way too slow, and it dissolves us of individual responsibility. If you have faith in God, then you should want to hurry things up and force the return of God as soon as possible. And you do that by recognizing that if you actually, before the Messiah comes, if you actually go and create the nations of Israel, bring all the Jews back, build the third temple, defeat all the enemies, then the Messiah will come naturally. And so, of course, most Jews hear this, and they think that this is blasphemy. It's heresy because you are defying the will of God. You think you can manipulate God into action. That is wrong. That is the opposite of redemption. That is the worst possible sin you can make. And so this eschatology is considered a fringe, an extreme, something to be ignored. The problem, though, is that if you think about it, what an eschatology really is doing is creating a vector board to force the religion to move in a certain direction. And also, if you think about it, if this is a case where eschatology is a vector that forces the mainstream to move in a certain direction, then whichever eschatology is the most extreme, the most violent will be the one that wins out. Does that make sense? In other words, what we're going to do today is look at the most extreme versions of different eschatologies. Because quite honestly, even though these extreme versions are shared by only a few people, they're the ones who are working the hardest to achieve their eschatology, and therefore they're forcing the religion they are in to move a certain way. So you hear this and you think this all confusing, but look at a passage from a biography of Rabbi. Remember, we had a look at Rabbi Sneerson talking to Netanyahu saying, hurry up. Let's hurry up the return of the Messiah. He is in charge of Shabbat Lubavitch, which again is an extreme eschatology, but again, because they are so extreme, they're willing to work as hard as possible to achieve their vision, and therefore they are forcing the Jewish mainstream in a certain direction.
Israel has become a world superpower. Together with a friendly state, the United States, we are one.
The timing of it makes me sort of believe that, at times anyway.
You ever get this sinking sense that you are sleepwalking through the end times, and what we are watching play out is simply God's design in Revelation? The sky above Jerusalem suddenly changed color. The clouds above its holy sites stopped moving and began to gather in strange formations. Perhaps artificial intelligence is the Antichrist, and the war that we are witnessing right now raging in the Middle East. It was just bound to happen, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. You hate to have been part of it, but nonetheless, God's plan is going to be God's plan. As you watch rockets rain down on Jerusalem, some of the holiest sites in all of Christendom and Islam and Judaism, you sort of get that sense that you can't stop what's coming, and what's coming is going to be Revelation itself. Before we hop into that video, please do me a quick favor. Hit that like button for the algorithm so that this video can reach more people like yourself. As you watch this unfold, the reality becomes clear. From the walls of Jerusalem, you can see it for yourself. The Iranian regime launching missiles directly toward the city, a place sacred to billions of believers. This is happening during Ramadan. Missiles crossing over the Western Wall, over the Dome of the Rock, and near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Some of the most holy sites in all of history, from ancient times to today. And maybe it makes you wonder, why is it always Jerusalem? Why does the world keep coming back to this one city? Because all three major religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are connected to this exact place. Their holiest sites, all concentrated within these walls. If footage now shows impact zones across Jerusalem, you can even see the church in the distance as missiles strike and explode nearby. Today, one blast reportedly landed close to the Dome of the Rock. And again, the question rises, where is the outrage? Because if a missile were to directly hit the Dome of the Rock, whether intentional or even something else entirely, the consequences would be immediate. Officials have already confirmed missiles are being fired toward Jerusalem, raising serious safety concerns for worshipers. As a result, prayers at certain holy sites have now been temporarily suspended. Think about that. In a city built around faith, prayer itself is being paused. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to be the holiest site in Christianity, today it is within range. So now Christianity's holiest site, Islam's sacred mosque, and Judaism's most important location, all within the same line of fire. According to tradition, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre contains both Golgotha, where Jesus was crucified, and the tomb where he was buried and resurrected. These are not just landmarks, they are central to the faith of billions. And yet, this is what the end time looks like. Reports indicate this is already another wave of missile launches, and the question becomes unavoidable. Could one of these strikes actually destroy a site like the Dome of the Rock? The answer is yes, it could, whether by direct impact or something else entirely. The possibility is real, and that's why this moment matters. That's why it's supposed to be inclined to believe that there is an actual threat. Regardless, it's landing near these holy sites. And if something happens to the Temple Mount, there's not going to be a possibility to replace it with what's already there, which means they are going to set up the third temple. It's not scripture. That's just what would be the most likely scenario to take place. And that possibility is what has so many observers watching Jerusalem with growing unease. Yesterday, Netanyahu described this moment as historic. Israel has now become a global superpower, standing side by side with the United States. But what makes this moment even more striking is that just days before, rumors had already begun to spread. claims that he was no longer alive, and then, suddenly, he speaks, alive, present, delivering a message at one of the most critical moments. This is important. Earlier, he suggested that the Jewish people will eventually reach what he described as the Messianic Era, though he emphasized that such a moment would not come as he spoke. Then he emphasized strength, resilience, and unity, calling it a major achievement in the face of growing threats. Those words quickly spread online and sparked intense debate. Some saw it as a statement of military confidence, a nation asserting its position on the world stage through power and alliance. Others, however, heard something deeper. They believed the translation may have exaggerated the meaning. A community note later suggested that Netanyahu may have actually been referring more broadly to the Messianic era, a period of peace and fulfillment in Jewish tradition, rather than the literal arrival of the Messiah. Because when a leader suddenly disappeared, then described a moment as historic, when he speaks of transformation, power, and alignment with a global force, it raises a different kind of question. Is this simply about strategy and survival? Or does it signal a turning point far greater than politics alone? Or could his words hint at something deeper connected to religious prophecy? For many watching, the timing is what stands out. A rising global conflict, missiles over Jerusalem, omens in the sky, and now a declaration of power, tied directly to one of the most influential nations on earth. But for others, it echoes something more unsettling. Because throughout history, moments of sudden power shifts, especially in regions tied to ancient prophecy, have often carried deeper meaning. Whether the comments were misunderstood, mistranslated, or simply taken out of context, they have reignited discussion about prophecy, history, and the future of one of the most contested locations on Earth. And when global power begins to concentrate around it, people start paying closer attention. So the question becomes, was this simply a statement of confidence? A message meant to strengthen morale? Or could it be part of a larger pattern? One that continues to unfold in real time? Because right now, this is no longer just rumors of war. Israel, the United States, Iran, and multiple nations are now directly involved. What began as tension is turning into open conflict. And when global powers align in the same region, history has shown it rarely stays contained. In a recent development that has stirred the world's attention, there's talk of a haunting sound that sends shivers down the spines of even the staunchest believers. To add to the surrealness of it all, the sky above the city filled with circling black crows, moving in thick, restless waves. It's a tumult that's rocked Jerusalem, our revered city. Folks are scrambling for safety, gripped by fear of what might unfold next. The tranquility we once knew has been replaced by an unsettling sense of foreboding. But what's the root cause of this chaos? And how will it reshape the lives of those who call Jerusalem home? We're diving deeper to unravel the mysteries that have gripped this sacred city. Before we continue, take a moment to support this video. By leaving a like, sharing it with others, or adding your thoughts in the comments, you help this message reach far more people. Because when engagement increases, the platform begins to push the video further, placing it in front of viewers who might never have seen it otherwise. And that matters, because the more people who see these events, the more people can begin to ask questions, connect the dots, and decide for themselves what it all means. So if this content resonates with you in any way, take a second to engage. Your support doesn't just help the channel, it helps this message travel further than it otherwise could. In recent days, a wondrous spectacle has unfolded in Israel, bringing a sense of solace to Christians far and wide. Imagine yourself amidst the sacred grounds of the Western Wall, where prayers echo through the corridors of time, intertwining faith with the tapestry of history. Here in this hallowed space, on a perplexing series of powerful sounds reverberated across central Israel, leaving many bewildered in their wake. Even the combined efforts of the military and law enforcement proved futile in unraveling the mystery behind these resounding echoes. Social media platforms buzzed with chatter as reports flooded in from areas like Gush Dan, Tel Aviv, and Petah Tikva, detailing accounts of thunderous booms and intense vibrations. Astonishingly, these enigmatic sounds traveled as far as Julis, situated 50 kilometers away from their point of origin. Despite exhaustive inquiries, both the Israel police and the armed forces remained at a loss to provide a definitive explanation for these explosive disturbances. What truly sets these sounds apart is their novelty and peculiarity, stirring an air of intrigue among the populace. For many, these eerie echoes bear an uncanny resemblance to ominous groans and metallic reverberations akin to musical instruments. Some even claim to discern indistinct voices intermingled with these peculiar sounds. Could these auditory anomalies signify something of profound significance? Not only in Jerusalem, all over the world, this mysterious sound is heard even clearer in the emerald sky of many countries. The people passing by felt trembling when they heard that sound, like a prophecy of destruction, from America to Canada to Australia. Apart from being inexplicable and sparking curiosity in the scientific community, these strange sounds have left indelible prints of fear in people grappling with its significance and possible implications. These strange noises reported around the world wouldn't have sparked questions about their meaning and whether they could be a sign from above. Imagine hearing such an unexpected and unsettling sound. What would you think? For some, it's a sound unlike anything heard before, a haunting, otherworldly cry piercing through the darkness. But what are these sounds and where exactly are they coming from? Or are these the fulfillment of biblical prophecy concerning the end of the age? But the tribulations do not stop there. Above Jerusalem, the sky, normally clear and still, is now filled with flocks of black birds. Ravens and crows circling endlessly, gathering in numbers that feel impossible to ignore. This is not a passing moment. Witnesses describe waves of dark wings moving across the skyline, casting shifting shadows over the ancient city. The sound alone, constant, a restless, has drawn attention from those below. Some point to environmental factors, changes in climate, migration patterns, or disruptions in nearby regions. But others look beyond that. Because this is happening at the same time, tensions across the Middle East continue to rise. Instability in regions like Syria and Iraq continues to ripple outward, bringing pressure, displacement, and the constant threat of escalation. And as these pressures build, the effects do not remain contained. They move across borders, across populations. In times like this, even natural phenomena begin to feel connected. What we are seeing may have explanations, but the timing and the convergence of events is what makes it difficult to ignore. Now, Israel itself has become the center of these strange events. And one city stands out more than all the rest, a place with an atmosphere that feels different, heavier, almost like it draws these moments in. That city is Jerusalem. Jerusalem, as the heart of Israel, has always held a unique place in history. In the Bible, it is often described not as a fortress, but as something vulnerable, watched, and constantly fought over. Despite its strong walls and strategic position in ancient times, this city has rarely known true peace. Because Jerusalem is not just land, it is a symbol, and that symbol has always attracted attention, from empires, from armies, from nations, all trying to claim control over it. So what makes Jerusalem different? Why does this one city continue to pull the world back to it again and again across generations? Why do conflicts keep returning to the same place, as if history itself is repeating? And what just happened near the Western Wall, under a sky that so many witnessed at the same time? The answer may lie in something deeper. When King David took Jerusalem and built the temple, it was seen as the fulfillment of that promise, a place where God's presence would dwell. For centuries, believers traveled across continents just to reach this city, and eventually entire wars like the Crusades were fought over it. For Muslims, Jerusalem, known as Al-Quds, holds deep spiritual meaning. It was the first direction of prayer and remains the third holiest city in Islam. For over 1,300 years, it has been under Muslim rule until control shifted in 1917 when British forces took the city from the Ottoman Empire. 3 faiths, 3 histories, all connected to one place. And that is why Jerusalem is different. Because when something happens here, it doesn't stay local, it echoes. At first, it didn't seem unusual. A few drops of rain fell quietly over Jerusalem, barely enough to draw attention. People in the plaza continued walking, some pausing only for a moment to glance at the sky. Rain, after all, is not unheard of here. But this wasn't normal rain. Within minutes, the sky began to change. Dark clouds gathered faster than expected, rolling in thick layers above the ancient city. The light faded. The air grew heavier. What started as a gentle drizzle quickly turned into a steady downpour, and then into something far more intense. The rain didn't stop. It kept coming, stronger, heavier, more persistent than anything people had anticipated. Then water began spreading across the stone ground, reflecting the lights of the city in shifting patterns. The atmosphere changed. Conversations grew quieter. People started watching instead of moving, and then it escalated. Without warning, the storm unleashed something far more violent. Large chunks of hail began crashing down from the sky. They struck rooftops, streets, and vehicles with sharp, explosive force. The sound echoed across the city, ice hitting stone, metal, glass, over and over again. Some people rushed for cover. Others stayed frozen, watching the sky as if trying to understand what they were witnessing. What made it even more unsettling wasn't just the storm itself. It was the timing. At the very same moment, tensions were rising across the region, with conflict building in the background. When the sky above Jerusalem was releasing this sudden, aggressive storm. In some recordings, trails of smoke from distant missiles could still be seen cutting across the clouds, while hail continued to fall. Two realities, war and weather, colliding in the same frame. Some called it coincidence. Others weren't so sure. Because moments like this don't just feel like weather. They feel like interruption. And as the storm continued pounding the city, one question began to quietly take shape. Was this just a rare, natural event, or a sign that something bigger was beginning to unfold? After the storm passed, many believed the moment was over. The sky began to clear. The rain slowed. The noise faded. Jerusalem seemed to return to its familiar rhythm, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. But beneath the surface, something else was quietly unfolding. It didn't begin with a dramatic event. No loud explosion, no sudden collapse, just small signs, easy to overlook at first. Hairline cracks appearing along the slopes of the Mount of Olives, subtle shifts in the ground that only a few noticed. Engineers and observers began reporting slight movements in certain areas. Nothing catastrophic, nothing urgent, but enough to raise questions, because this wasn't just any location. This was one of the most historically and spiritually significant places on Earth, and it sits directly above a major fault line. Scientifically, the explanation is clear. The land beneath Jerusalem is part of a massive tectonic system stretching across the region. Pressure builds slowly over time. Eventually, it has to release. That's how earthquakes begin. But what makes this moment different is not the science. It's the timing. Because these subtle shifts are not happening in isolation. They are appearing alongside everything else. The sky changing, the storms intensifying, the tension rising across the region. Individually, each event can be explained. Together, they start to feel connected. Some reports even suggest that areas near the eastern gate are showing signs of instability, as if the ground itself is under quiet pressure, waiting for something. And history has shown this before. Long before modern instruments, earthquakes in this region were powerful enough to reshape entire cities. Foundations cracked, walls collapsed. The land itself moved without warning. If it happened before, it can happen again. But this time, people are watching more closely. Because the question is no longer just if the ground can move. It's why now? Why at a time when everything else already feels unstable, is the earth beneath one of the most important places in the world beginning to shift as well? And if the pressure beneath the surface continues to build, what happens when it finally releases? At first, nothing looked different. The streets of Jerusalem remained crowded. People walked the same paths they always had. The stone beneath their feet felt solid, unchanged, dependable. But that sense of stability can be deceptive, because sometimes collapse doesn't begin at the surface. It begins underneath. Reports started emerging quietly, small sections of ground in and around the region showing signs of weakness. subtle depressions forming where the soil had slowly lost its strength. Areas where the earth no longer held the same weight it once did. Then, without warning, it happened. The ground gave way. Not everywhere, not all at once, but in specific points, sudden, unexpected collapses that caught people off guard. What once felt solid suddenly wasn't. The surface broke, revealing empty space beneath. Sinkholes. They didn't come with loud announcements, no clear signal before they appeared. Just a moment where everything seemed normal, and the next moment, the ground was gone. What makes events like this unsettling isn't just the damage, it's the silence before it happens. Because for years, water can slowly erode the layers beneath the surface. Rock dissolves, cavities form, support disappears, all of it hidden from view until the structure above can no longer hold. And then it collapses. See, scientists explain it as natural erosion, a geological process that has always existed. But again, the question isn't just what is happening, it's when. Because this isn't happening in isolation. It's happening after the sky turned violent, after the ground began to shift, while tension continues to rise across the region. Each event on its own feels explainable, but together, they tell a different story, a pattern where stability is slowly being stripped away, from above and now from below. And maybe that's what makes this omen different. It doesn't roar like a storm. It doesn't shake like an earthquake. It simply reveals something people rarely think about. The ground you trust the most may not be as solid as it seems. And if the foundation itself can disappear without warning, what else might be closer to collapse than anyone realizes? By now, many believed it was over. The storm had passed. The ground had shifted. The city seemed to settle again into its ancient rhythm. But Jerusalem wasn't finished. That night, the sky changed once more. At first, it was just a flicker, a brief flash of light behind thick clouds, easy to ignore, easy to dismiss. But then it happened again, brighter this time, stretching across the sky above the old city. And then came the sound. Thunder rolled across Jerusalem, deep and distant, echoing through the narrow streets and over the ancient stones.